And my question to you is this: what do you think the medical world will be in the year 2030? What do you think will have happened to society by then? How will people live in the future? How will they die? Next question: will they die? And if they do die, what will be causing them to die? Let me ask your own opinion here today. The average life expectancy perhaps today in Switzerland is what, 82 years, 83 years? 80. What do you think the average life expectancy will be in Switzerland in the year 2040?
Maybe 90.
90 years. Who thinks it could be longer than 90 years? Who thinks that it could be a longer life expectancy than 90 years by the year 2040? Put your hands up. Who thinks it could be less? Okay, we're not sure. But one thing's for sure: it's going to be different. And that has very big implications. Already we have a situation where 3/4 of the entire wealth of Europe and America is owned by the over 65s. As the population continues to grow older, there are the most unimaginable consequences for every aspect of our world. And of course, people want to live forever. What do you think would be the market value of a drug which slows down the ticking clock of the aging process by 50%? Do you think that such a drug could ever be found? Yes? Put your hands up if you think we could find a drug one day in the next 50 years that would slow down the biological clock of aging by 50%. Put your hand up. Have a look around. You, my friends, are in the business of making tomorrow's history. But you know, if you do succeed, we will have another problem. Health messages start to backfire. For example, smoking. My mother doesn't smoke, but now she has reached the age of the late 60s. She says now is the time to take some risks. After all, how on earth am I going to die? She says, I could live to 150. The health messages begin to change. Because what is the point of telling people not to do this or not to do that when they are scared of getting old? When people are wondering how they can get old more quickly. They want to stay well for a very long time and then everything to end. What they do not want is for future technology to produce this. And it goes on and on and on. So it's impossible to die. And of course, in new medicine we have resource issues. We have issues, pressures relating, for example, to euthanasia. We have genetic pressures, which I will talk about, the opportunity to redesign human life, to design life according to our own specifications, to integrate digital and biotech technologies, to create lifestyle drugs to improve intelligence and other things. These are very big issues. And of course, sometimes we get unexpected surprises. For example, the drug looking to stimulate the melanocortin-4 system, and which we hoped would be a good treatment for being overweight, we now find also improves your sex life and gives you a good suntan. But the big question is it safe to use? Probably not at the moment. But in it all, we find the cost of health care increasing dramatically, and with it, once again, further social pressures. That's the background then for looking at the impact of biotechnology, and I want to ask some philosophical questions, if you like, which are extremely important. We are in a future age which will be dominated by two revolutions, the digital and the biotech. The digital only changes what we do, of course. The biotech has the power to change who you are. We are only in the first day of the digital age and only in the first hour of the biotech age. And we see hype we see hype in the digital and a lack of hype in the biotech. Let me explain. I want you to imagine a conversation between Bill Gates and Joseph Sibeli. Bill Gates, the founder, obviously, of a huge technology revolution in digital. Joseph Sibeli is someone who took a cell from his own body and fused it with a cow's egg. And that cow's egg began to divide into his own identical twin clone. He then destroyed the embryo. Imagine the conversation between these two. What happens? Well, Bill Gates sometimes inspires anger and controversy, but the difference is this. Joseph Sibeli usually keeps quiet about his work. Bill Gates tells us before it's happened. Bill Gates tells us, you will be doing this by tomorrow, and it takes 10 years. Joseph Sibeli tells us, I don't think this is very likely, and in fact he's already done it. The work that I told you about with the cow egg and his own skin cells was done at the same time as Dolly the sheep was made. But Joseph Sibeli did not feel able to tell about this work for 3.5 years. Why? It's very important in the age of biotech. Bill Gates tells us we'll all be video conferencing by tomorrow morning, and we won't. He always brings the future into the present. But some parts of biotech are so sensitive from the ethical point of view that people want to keep us in the past. And this makes the discussion of your work extremely difficult in terms of fundraising. When Dolly the sheep was created, you knew nothing about her. You only heard about Dolly the sheep when she was 7 months old. In fact, she had been made 7 months before that, and the work was already begun a year before that. So we had almost 3 years gap between the work of Dolly and you knowing about it. Now, of course, there are reasons to do with patenting, the need to publish in the correct form in the research journals, but it is a challenge to you because it means that the public understanding of biotech is often 3 years behind the reality. And it's difficult to warm up the market because as you warm the market up, you can sometimes create a public reaction against the technology. This has been a major challenge and will continue to be so. So digital is usually oversold with few ethical concerns, no threats of laws. Early adopters have great image and it has a limited power. Biotech, significant threat of anti-laws, funding is difficult, early adopters have a poor image, and yet it has unlimited power to change life. Unlimited, well, in all kinds of ways. I want you to imagine what the future could be, as I say. You see, there's universal agreement in this room about, almost universal agreement, about what will eventually be possible. I suggest there are huge doubts about what is possible, and a great debate about how long it will take. We're talking about extraordinarily accurate technology, breathtaking. We're talking about the ability to place a single component. I want us to imagine that we are now creating a new alphabet of life. For me, the most incredible thing about biotech is, and this the public don't understand, is that we are all operating on the same language. That the entire code of life is all written in Microsoft Basic and can be edited with Microsoft Word and cut and used in PowerPoint. That's the extraordinary thing, that my genes work in an amoeba, that an insect genes work in your body, that I can write a code that has never existed before and create a totally unique life form. At the moment, of course, it's all very crude. We cut a slice from my genetic code for insulin and we put it into bacteria. This is not clever. This is crude. What is more clever is to start writing totally unique words of our own, to develop our own language. What would be even more clever would be to develop a new coding system altogether, which isn't even based on the same 4 base pairs, but actually a completely different kind of genetic language. Could we do it? Yes, we can. We talk about hardware and software, but the relationship between IT and biotech is very interesting. I talk about geneware, actually thinking about genetic code in exactly the same way as software, because that's how tomorrow's generation will think about it. They'll say, we're just going to write a program. Of course, we are already doing this, but only in a very small way right now. What would be the limits of this kind of thing? Could we create new life forms altogether? Yes, of course we could. Could we create this creature? Of course. Of course. Could we create a human being with green skin? Yes, of course. All we have to do is combine the genes for chlorophyll from the plant with the human being. Can we create an insect with eyes on its wings? Yes, of course. Can we put a spider's web genes into a goat? Of course we have done this. How far can we go? Can we recover the extinct animal? Yes, of course, and very simple for us to do it. Not difficult at all, because all we are doing is using genes which work, cutting and pasting bits of genetic code just like pieces of Microsoft Word. I'm not talking about recovery of extinct animals. I'm talking about rewriting life, writing new kinds of life, and the kind of implications it will have. Many of you may have seen this video. Who's seen this? Yeah, it's a great video. It could be a picture of the biotech industry. I want to know whether we could create a creature like this with only one eye in the middle of its head. Of course. There is no reason why biotech couldn't do this. We don't know what kind of end it would come to, but these are very profound questions. Over 1 million transgenic animals were made in British laboratories in the last 2 years. Each one of these animals was a unique mixture between 2 existing species through crude technology of cutting and pasting pieces of Microsoft Word code. But the issue is this. Firstly, you have infinite combinations just by using existing pieces of code, not by writing anything, just by crudely cutting and pasting little pieces of code from one animal into another, from an insect into a chimpanzee, from a chimpanzee into a frog, from a frog into a rabbit, and then you add some human genes as well. This is crude. In the year 2030, scientists will look in the museum of biotech, and they will say that what we were doing in the first decade of the 3rd millennium was very primitive. And they will be describing a different kind of world altogether, where they are writing new code from scratch, where they are creating something in their mind and totally starting from the very beginning. And that museum will record the extraordinary speed of change. 200 base pairs per day being translated in 1990. Of course, now we're up to over 1 million base pairs a day. US Genomics, as you know, in Massachusetts, now has a machine which scans a single DNA molecule 200,000 bases long in 1 millisecond. What about tomorrow? Their aim is to sequence your entire genome in milliseconds. That's their aim. To be able to take a single blood sample and to have, bang, your printout, the entire printout of your genome compared to the average genome in Switzerland, for example, and have that printout all coming out. And the length of time to print it out will be vastly longer than the time to analyze your blood. A strange world. How do we get these genes in? Well, at the moment, it's all very primitive. We inject them with guns, as you know. We spray with liposomes or viruses. We build viruses. And yet here we're going to see also dramatic changes. Just in the last few weeks we have seen amazing new progress with nanoparticles, 25 nanometers in size, 1/4 of the size of the normal liposome, and 6,000 times as effective in reprogramming cells. We've seen other work in the last few weeks with the adult stem cells. By the way, embryonic stem cells is a last century technology. To take stem cells from an embryo, or even a cloned embryo, which is even more last century, forget it. This is a technology which has huge ethical questions about it, and in 5 to 10 years I am sure will have been overtaken entirely by adult stem cell technology, with which there is no ethical question whatsoever. This is the miracle for me. Every time I think about this, as a physician, as a scientist, it makes me think again. The fact that I can take, Ulrich, from your skin, a small sample, and find in your skin or your body, anywhere else in your body probably, but let's take your skin, I can find stem cells. I can treat them in the laboratory with a solution from some other cells, maybe nerve cells, and persuade those stem cells, those skin cells, to change into brain tissue and to create a perfect repair for your brain. All I have to do is mix the solution of these new cells, take your arm, inject it into your arm, and forget all about it. And these cells will go around the body in the bloodstream, and every time they get close to the brain, they get very excited. And the 4th or 5th time they go around through the body, the cells manage to get through, and they burrow their way through the pipe. They go through the pipe, and each of these cells is a complete, independent, thinking, intelligent repair system, able to find the place in your brain that has the bad damage, to get in there and to produce a nearly perfect repair. This for me is a total miracle, and yet of course is already becoming today's reality. I had a meeting recently with British scientists who are at the cutting edge of adult stem cell technology. They are already producing a nearly perfect repair of heart attacks in animals using cells from the bone. This is today, my friends. What about tomorrow? What about 5 years' time? What about 10 years' time? Forget having to grow tissue in the laboratory. We can grow it inside you. Forget me as a surgeon having to cut open your heart and inject various pieces of new tissue and stitch it in. All I do is I put it into your blood and forget all about it. This is an extraordinary age in which we live. And yet there are ethical questions. These transgenics, these 1 million transgenic animals made in the UK in the last year or two, were strange creatures, some of them. Many of them, perhaps 25%, had human genes added to them. And of course, whenever we add human genes to an animal to do this kind of work, we create reactions. The technology is again getting simpler. This again was reported in the last few weeks. If a farmer wants to do his own transgenics, this is an easy way to do it. You take sperm from your animal, you wash it very carefully, and you mix it up with a solution with the right gene in it, and you centrifuge it. And then you use the sperm for artificial insemination by donor. And those sperm have already taken up the new gene. It's 25 times more efficient than any other method of doing the same thing. Breathtaking. This is something that even I could do in the kitchen of my house. Hello? I could do this even if I risked it with my own sperm. I could take a sample of my own sperm in a kitchen of my own house. I could introduce into my own sperm a new gene which I have bought on the internet. reprogram my own sperm and inject it into my wife. Now, although you are laughing, my friends, please don't dismiss what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we are entering a new age. An age where it is no longer the technical expert in a biotech center that has the power to create, but anybody has the power to do it just as easily as buying a copy of Microsoft Office. And of course, we have very big questions about the difference between reprogramming my own body and reprogramming my own sperm and eggs. It could take over 200 years to see the problem if we start reprogramming in a way which goes on from one generation to another. In mice, we have to breed mice through maybe 10 or 20 generations to see if there's a problem. With humans, 10 or 20 generations will take us hundreds of years. So these kind of things are looking rather simple now. This is last century stuff. Human genes into sheep, and we get alpha-1 antitrypsin. Scorpion poison genes into cabbages, and the cabbages kill caterpillars, but we don't know what happens to people. Spider genes into goat to make a thread for surgeons. Again, last century. Human genes into pigs to make humanized hearts. Yes, the only problem is we're not sure if there are hidden viruses inside the pigs which could get transferred into humans. That's a risk for us. But again, last century. Interesting. And I'm sure it will be useful for us in the future. But last century. And very last century, 1983. Human genes into a microbe to make insulin. Perhaps one of the most spectacular examples of gene technology that we have ever seen. And here is the strange thing. That despite that example in 1983, we have seen very little in medicine that has given us that kind of result. I do believe, however, that the dawn has been a long time, and we will see over the next 5 to 10 years a dramatic improvement in the number of gene therapies, gene treatments, whatever you like, whether it's for cancer, HIV, a vaccine against rheumatoid arthritis. I don't know when it will come, but it will come. Rabbit fur genes added to cotton, yes, and we can grow fur on plants. We could create rabbit-resistant lettuce. All kinds of possibilities begin to present themselves to us, and with it, of course, challenges. If it's true, and we know it is, that 99.9% of all genes are the same anyway in everyone, then we only need to look at the 0.01, and in the Iceland project we will soon have some very important results. As you know, 250,000 people are in this study. We are fixing the life history of all the individuals in Iceland with their genetic code, which gives us an extraordinary opportunity to understand that 0.1%. What is it that makes Miss Iceland so pretty? What is the gene, or the genes, which give her that particular shape of her face? How can we encourage certain genes to be expressed and others not to be? And what happens when you get your printout within 60 seconds of a blood sample? What happens when we compare your data with all the data from Iceland, which we will have very soon, and begin to give you a list of 500 illnesses with different statistical risks? Are we ready? Now, genetic prophecy, of course, gives us not only a genetic fingerprint, not only a personal risk of disease, but it enables us to monitor high-risk people. It enables us to adapt lifestyle, and most importantly, it enables us to find out who will produce the reaction to the drug. But again, there are other challenges. The Washington sniper may well be sentenced to death by electrocution in the United States. If this happens, I guarantee the first thing his defense lawyers will do is look at his genetic code. They want to know already whether he has monoamine oxidase A at a low level. Because if he does, they will then say that his genes made him do it. We know that if you look at 100 men who commit offences, 100 men, if you look at 100 men in New Zealand, you will find 44% of all violent offences are committed by just 12 of them. And we can tell who they are genetically. In this room, there are 200 people, 100 men. I can test all of you and tell you straight away which 12 of you are likely to do half the murders in this group. Already. And I tell you it will be two things. It will be the gene and a history of neglect and abuse as a child. Those two things operating together produce a dramatic increase in criminal activity. So you can see the kind of world that we are beginning to enter into. It's not just a question of saying, oh, genetic prophecy is wonderful because it means we can treat disease. Genetic prophecy means that we could be starting to ask all kinds of questions about responsibility. Is it right to sentence him to death if he has the wrong gene? If he couldn't help it? If he'd had another gene, he would never have committed murder. So what could we do with this technology in terms of medicine? Well, I'm certain that we will be growing replacement cartilage for those with osteoarthritis. I'm certain of that. We may debate the time, but it's there. We will be there. I'm certain we will have a vaccine that stops rheumatoid arthritis, using some of the kinds of exciting technologies that you will hear about today, in terms of ways to present antigens in powerful combinations. I'm certain that we will have the opportunity to repair the spinal cord. I don't know that Christopher Reeve will walk because his spinal cord damage is old now. But I'm certain that we can find the genetic trigger to allow nerves to grow down the spinal cord just like they grow down the arm. We are already at the position to begin thinking about repairing human brain. We could conceivably grow an entire replacement human eye. We will certainly have much more effective vaccines against cancer cells and a cure for baldness. We will have one day an efficient mechanism for delivering genes into the lung of people with cystic fibrosis. We will certainly have means of developing replacement tissues for diabetes, liver, or heart. We will certainly be moving away from drugs for disease, for drugs to keep people well, to a new area, which are gene treatments to improve performance, whether it's sexual performance, memory, athletic ability. We're already close to this. In fact, some have said that the last Olympic Games is the last natural one we will ever see. Because in the future, it is likely that athletes will have temporary boosts from injections of genetic material, which will be difficult to detect. Hair regrowth is an example of something where we're not curing a disease, it's a cosmetic issue, but the market is vast. If we could find stem cells in the skin and convert them to hair follicle cells, can you imagine the commercial value of that? Yes. Can you put a figure on it?
15 billion?
We're close, aren't we? We know we can produce anything we wish from stem cells from an adult. We're very, very close. In fact, I said in 1987 in one of my books, I said, soon, I don't know when, soon we will be able to have a shampoo which you buy, you wash your hair with, and it changes your hair color permanently. And now, of course, it's been done. This is announced in the New Scientist just in the last 4 or 5 weeks. They created an adenovirus which had new pigment genes in it. They washed the hair of mice, and the mouse color began to fluoresce in ultraviolet light. The hair glows in the dark now. My friends, this is no business of treating people. This is not like a medicine. These mouths are genetically changed as a result of a shampoo. These mouths are being rebuilt. Their bodies are no longer what they were because of a shampoo. So when people say, oh, Dr. Dixon, you're talking about redesigning the human race, this is a little bit like science fiction, I would say, take care. This is a journey we are already on. We can grow new teeth. Perhaps some need them. 30 pigs' teeth have been grown in the bodies of rats. They created a scaffold and seeded it with tooth bud cells from an embryo, and they have grown complete teeth which they can now insert into the pig mouth. I asked about aging. We have already created nematode worms that are living twice as long as they should do. And we've even found a way to do it without affecting their fertility. It was a simple trick. I say simple. It took the scientists a long time, but in 20 years' time they will look back and say it was a simple trick. Ingenious, clever, but actually simple. What about cloning? My website, my own personal website, has had 5.5 million hits in the last year. Most of it about genetics and a lot of it on cloning. Every week someone writes to me saying, please, dear Dr. Dixon, please help me to be cloned. A mother wrote to me and she said this, dear Dr. Dixon, please help me. I wish to clone my father and to have my father as a little baby. Can we do it? Yes, we can. She says, my father is dead. Can we clone the dead? Yes, we can. Dolly was made from frozen cells. Could we clone someone without them knowing? Yes, we can. Just drink from this glass. Thank you. Now I have enough of your genetic code to produce your twin. Are scientists doing it? Yes, they are. There's a global race. Who will pay for it? Who's going to pay for cloning? Where is all this research money coming from? You have difficulty raising my biotech venture capital money, so who is putting all this money up for cloning? Have you any idea?
Militaries.
Actually, it's not the military, it's the media. What do you think the world media will pay for the exclusive rights of the photographs and the life story of the world's first cloned baby? A lot of money. In fact, some have said it would be $10, $20, $30 million at least, minimum, for the first 3 months alone. Cloning is technically simple. I say, why technically simple? Well, Joseph Zabelli did it with a cow's egg, for goodness sake. He did it 5 years ago with a cow's egg and his own cell. Of course it's going to work with a human egg. Of course the reports are true, as that many people around the world are already managing to do it. We've done it with every other mammal we've tried. Of course there is an interest in it, because large numbers of people around the world do want to do it. Scientists want to do it. So it will happen. And then you and I will be faced with a challenge as to whether we wanted it to happen and whether something should have been done to try to stop it more effectively. Embryonic stem cells from pre-implantation embryos could of course be useful, but whole organs means something different. I've met a scientist who said he wanted to create a cloned baby. He knew that stem cells would not do it. He wanted to create a whole organ. So his intention was to grow a fetus to an advanced stage, 24, 26, 28 weeks, and then take a huge chunk of tissue to kill the fetus and to take the pieces that he needs and use them in medical research. Many people I know, including myself, would be very, very unhappy with that kind of approach. We know very little about biotech. We are still in the earliest days. For example, we don't know why these clones die. We don't know why it is that two animals with absolutely identical genetic code should be so different. We don't know why cloned cows grow to twice their normal size and have to be delivered by cesarean section from the mother. And we don't know why many cows fall over and die 24 weeks after birth when they look perfectly healthy. We don't know why Dolly the sheep is already biologically much older than she should be and suffered from severe arthritis. So we have a long way to go. And we have many ethical questions to answer. And we need to remember the time in which we live. In all the companies I work with, in every industry, I say this. Today, in the year 2002, there is an almost invisible threat to the future survival of every large organization. It can completely destroy your business in less than 1 week. Especially if you are Enron or Arthur Andersen, but also if you are a biotech organization. It's highly infectious. It can take out a network of industries in one attack. No governments can legislate against it. Laws are weak, and we're talking about a huge change in values. This is extremely important in biotech. We're talking about in every area of our society. In the early third millennium, we are talking about a huge, rapid, and hard to predict change in how people feel, the emotions that people feel. We're talking about changes in values, in expectations, in moral codes, in ethics, in moods, and emotions. We're talking about a significant impact on every aspect of consumer behavior, worker motivation, and investor relations. Let me ask you a question about cloning. Imagine today on CNN, when you go home, you see pictures of the world's first cloned baby, and you see a mother with a beautiful cloned baby in her arms. It's not the mother, it's her twin sister. The baby looks up into the eyes of her twin sister, not her mother, her twin sister. But I want to ask you a question. What do you think will be the effect on public thinking about biotech of such a story? Hands up if you think it will be more positive. Hands up if you think it will be more negative. The mood is hard to predict. But one thing is for sure, the world of biotech will never be the same. Is that headline ever going to happen? Put your hands up if you think that headline is ever going to happen. That we will one day see a CNN report with a cloned baby. Put your hands up. Okay. So what you've just told me is very important. I've just picked one story. You've told me that some scientist in another part of the world, operating in an area of biotech totally unconnected with anything you are doing today, in terms of drug discovery, treatment of disease, enhancing quality of life, saving lives. It's completely disconnected from anything to do with that, but this story, which will come, will be likely to produce a reaction against your work too. So now we begin to understand why it's not just a question of corporate ethics, or it's not just a question of talking biotechnology ethics. It's a question of talking mood. It's a question of understanding emotion. A question of explaining, of winning the public debate, of taking the moral high ground, of telling the wonderful good news story of what we can do to change lives and to save people from disease. So will concerns go or will they fade? On the one hand, sensational headlines will increase the concern. On the other hand, the good news stories decrease concern. Louise Brown was the world's first IVF baby. At the time, IVF was considered to be morally evil in many nations. But she was created, and now, because of these good news stories, IVF has become totally acceptable. So you can see that this thing can go in both directions. The primary issue is that the good news stories need to come much more frequently than the bad news stories. Which stories do people remember, the good news or the bad news? Tagesanzeiger. When you open it up, what do you read? Good news or bad news? What does Tagesanzeiger sell on? Good news or bad news? Bad. Of course. The only good news in a newspaper is the adverts. And you don't believe them. Because newspapers are sold on bad news. What's the CNN reports? What does it tell you? About acts of great courage or about how many bombs have gone off? Of course it's the bombs. Well, that's a challenge for you, because what it means is you can be sure that if we have 10 spectacular successes in terms of the treatment of disease, and one stupid scientist who does some crazy thing with human genes and monkeys, which will people remember? The human genes and the monkey, right? So we need to be very, very good. We need to be very, very good at telling our story, telling it loud and clear, working together, and we need to have very clear thinking about some of the issues which face us, to which there are no easy answers. For example, gene screening for insurance. Do we agree with it or don't we? Is it a good idea or is it not? In fact, I promise you, you will have to have it. We can't have a situation where you can get an instant printout of your genetic code in 10 years' time. And you have that knowledge, but the insurance company doesn't. That's the problem. That's why gene screening will happen. But when it does, we will find all kinds of other issues, such as how do you insure people who cannot be insured because they have bad genes? But it's these kinds of things which will produce the headlines. Choosing the sex of the child, choosing other characteristics, destroying what you don't like, growing children outside of the body, putting a womb from a woman inside a man, giving birth at 75 years old, creating one child to cure another, a human giving birth to an animal, or more likely, a monkey giving birth to a human. These are strange worlds. And here's another one. Here's a question. I put this question to a judge in Britain. I said this: how many human genes does a chimpanzee have to win human rights in the European court? He knows me well, so he didn't laugh. He just stopped for a moment. He said, if this monkey is more than half human, I will prosecute it for murder. I said, you know, the monkey is already 98% the same as a human. In that case, we will only need to give this monkey 1.1% of the human genome. And I will prosecute it for murder because it is more human than anything else. I cannot regard it as anything other than human. I said, are you aware that in the last few months we have put at least 1% of the human genome, different pieces of it, into hundreds of thousands of animals in different countries? This is a profound question, a great challenge for us. And of course, every country has different standards. One of the first questions I was asked as I walked in today was, Dr. Dixon, what do you think about the legal position of embryo stem cell research in London? You are very liberal in your country. And of course, we have a situation where over 170 nations in the world have no legislation covering gene technology whatsoever. Which could be very good news if you are having trouble doing some work in Switzerland, but it could be very bad news for you if it means that some scientists are moving to where there are no controls, but the media is still there. And one day, they will be reported for what they're doing. So how do we develop our universal ethics? Well, there's a common principle, which is the yuck factor. The mood, the emotional reaction of people to say either yes or yuck. They don't like saying no. They don't like saying it's wrong. They don't like to say it's immoral. They just say yes or yuck. Yuck. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying. And this yuck factor is a dominant force, I believe, in the future of understanding reactions to biotech. It's an emotional rejection. Here's another part of it, the monster principle. For example, if you put the gene from a human into a pig, they want to see the pig. Does it look human? If it looks like a pig, then they're happy. It can be as human as you like inside. It could have a completely human brain inside, but so long as the face of the pig is still human, they're happy. If, however, the face of the pig is slightly changed, then there will be a huge reaction. So there's the monster principle. Thirdly, there's the natural versus the unnatural principle. And the closer we keep to what nature originally intended, the easier it is for us to sell the biotech. And fourthly, there are human and animal rights. And that is another big issue, which deeply affects your own work, with welfare concerns for the animals concerned. Now, in it all, there are spiritual issues too. And I'm not just talking about Islamic fundamentalism and what you could do in the Middle East, nor am I talking about the sensitivities of the Christian right wing in America. I'm talking about the spiritual convictions in all of us in this room. Surveys show that at least 70% of the people you are sitting next to today have spiritual convictions of some kind. You may be a follower of Jesus Christ, as I am. You may be a follower of Muhammad or of Buddha, or you may be someone who looks at the pattern of the stars. I don't mind. But the issue is, spirituality is important. The belief that there is more to us than a string of genetic codes. And if we are more than our genes, then where is this added component, a mystery? Can it be measured? Can it be created, strengthened, weakened, controlled, or destroyed? Do all life forms have another dimension, or is it just humans? How many human genes does a monkey have to need to go to the priest for confession? This is a theological question now. It's a philosophical one. How does spirituality change the way we feel about altering the words of life? As a doctor, I have often been present at the moment of death. Who here has been present at the moment of death of a friend or a member of your family? I have had that privilege many times. Many times I have sat with someone in their own room as they're lying on the bed and they're very close to death. And I've been there in that half an hour or an hour during which their life has come to an end. And the breathing is quiet. And sometimes I wonder if this person has already gone. All I can hear is the tick of the clock and the traffic outside the door. And she's still here because when her sister comes in, she squeezes my hand. And I sense her presence in the room, in all the things around her home. I can't feel a pulse. She's going. She is not in pain. She is at peace. She knows where she's going. She is a spiritual person. And then there's another breath, and it takes me by surprise. Because doctors can never tell the moment of death. It's not like the films. It's a process. And after 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I see that something has changed. She's gone. But here is a mystery. Every cell in her body is still alive. Her skin is still growing. We had to shave my father the day after he died, again, because his beard carried on growing, even though his body was dead. My father's bone marrow was still producing red and white cells. His gut was still digesting his food. His heart was still chaotically contracting. Most of my father's brain was still alive, but my father had gone. It is a mystery to us, and we see this same mystery in the fusion of a sperm with an egg at the very start of human life. I'm saying that we are obviously, most of us recognize that we are more than bags of biodata. Clearly. And yet it is this mystery which gives people this feeling of concern about and respect about the world of biotech. That when we're starting to refit sperm from a human being, what are we doing? When we are creating a fusion between a sperm and an egg, and then taking embryonic stem cells and destroying the embryo, what are we doing? These are issues which create emotion and concern, sensitivity. And biotech, if biotech is going to win, if biotech is going to take the moral high ground, then we must understand this mystery, embrace it, and run with it. And show that we are scientists who respect the mysteries of life. That we are in the business of building a better future. That we are using all forms of life sensitively, with great care, in order to create a better kind of tomorrow. That we understand the concerns that people have. Here's a challenge. Will spirituality alter the development of biotech research? Or will biotech research alter the development of spirituality? Or will it be both in the biotech age? But we can't ignore it. Scientists that think that they can operate in a moral vacuum are stupid. Scientists who say that all science is morally neutral are stupid. Scientists, they're just foolish. It may be morally neutral to you, but it's emotionally strong to everyone else. Scientists who think that it's not for them to decide what they do. Jerry Hall was some such scientist. In Washington, D.C., he decided to artificially twin human embryos, another form of cloning, and he was quite successful. And in 1993, after he had done it, he told everyone, and he had a press conference. He said, I'm telling everybody what I've done because I want to find out whether I should have done it or not, and whether I should do it some more. Of course, what he should have done is talked about it beforehand. And the fact that he didn't talk about it beforehand meant that people no longer trusted him. Because they want to know, what else are you working on? What are you working on now, Jerry Hall? That you're going to have a press conference about in 2 years' time that raises huge ethical questions for some people. Why don't you have the courage and tell us now? Huh? Why don't you have your press conference now? Lay it all on the table, all the things you are doing. So this transparency is very important, not just in Enron accounting, but in biotech accounting. I'm not talking about biotech money now. I'm talking about accounting for base pairs. I'm talking about accounting for gene swaps. I'm talking about accounting for living organisms experimented on. I'm talking about accounting for what happens in the animal house. Transparency, transparency, transparency. Being open, excited, making the case, convincing people in the living rooms of our nation that what we are about has the power to change our world for the good. But we need to do it as we go, rather than at the end. So we take the moral high ground. We show how biotech and medicine builds a better kind of world, how we will cure disease, how we will prevent cancer, how we will deliver children from all kinds of very complex and kinds of suffering, how we will take steps within the industry to regulate, to control, to encourage supervision, to do all we can to stop scientists from doing things which they should not do. A final thought is this. I spend a lot of time in developing countries, and some say to me, when will there be a vaccine against AIDS? When will there be a proper vaccine against malaria? And I have to tell them the truth, which is that very little money has been going into these kinds of programs compared to drug treatment for AIDS, drug treatment for malaria. And the reason is this, that many biotech companies know that if you were to discover a vaccine tomorrow that completely prevents the spread of HIV, and I've been in countries like Uganda, in India, Thailand, other areas which are totally devastated by this illness, if you, Dr. Renner, could find such a vaccine, the problem is that the rest of the world will ask you to give it away. You understand what I'm saying? Already we have seen drug patents violated in 2/3 of the world, in South Africa, in Brazil. It's now becoming impossible to sell a drug at the right price worldwide. You know the price of Cipro in New York. Cipro is the anti-anthrax drug, but it's a very important antibiotic. Cipro price in New York is $5.25 for a single tablet. On the streets of Calcutta, 30 cents. One is made in India without a patent, without license. The other is made in the United States. And you know what happened? There was a big court case to say, this is wrong. President Bush says, this is wrong. If they can steal Cipro, they can steal Microsoft Basic, they can steal everything. We have to protect our intellectual capital. Otherwise, cryonics has no future. Right? President Bush said this, Tony Blair said it, the German Chancellor said it, everyone agrees. All the lawyers in the world, they go to South Africa for a big court case. They are backed by 16 of the largest pharma companies, and you know what happened? The court case never even went to trial. Why? I wish I could tell you that there was some huge global campaign by something as powerful as Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, which made the pharma companies change their minds, but it wasn't. There was no big global campaign, but there was a change of mood, a change in public emotion. And what happened one day was each of the boards of these companies realized that this was a battle they could win, but they would lose the entire war. They could win, they could stop the drug Cipro being made in the streets of India. But if they did, they would lose the moral high ground. They would lose their moral authority. They would lose market respect. they would create a huge reaction of anger in 2/3 of the entire world. 4 billion people would become their enemy. And so, in one moment, they decided to stop the court action. Now, this has important implications for biotechnology, because biotechnology is the most wonderful thing. To be able to create a cure inside a single organism, let's say the microbe that produces insulin, and to transfer the technology from the United States to India, all I need is 1/2 mil, 25 microbes. One microbe has the power, of course, to replace a $15 billion biochemical facility to make insulin in the hard way. And with a single fountain pen, 1 mil of solution can steal this technology from one country and transfer it to another. And now I can brew insulin as simply as brewing Swiss beer. This is the power of the technology. This is the power of the technology to improve human life, to cure disease,